Is Russia really on the brink of invading Ukraine? Well, it sure looks like it. Defense officials are warning 120,000 Russian troops are building up at Ukraine's doorstep. Global leaders sweating over Putin's next move. President Biden just wrapped up a call with Ukraine's President Zelensky. Reports suggest that Biden would tell Zelensky to give up a portion of land controlled by Russian-backed separatists, but Press Secretary Jen Psaki says that's so false. Biden said there will be severe consequences if Russia makes the move. However, he admitted that putting U.S. boots on the ground, that is off the table for now. Does that mean Putin has the upper hand? And can anything be done to stop him? Here to discuss, retired Navy SEAL senior chief and candidate for Wisconsin's 3rd congressional district, it is Derrick Van Orden. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Why does he want Crimea?
Well, he took Crimea. We're talking about the Donetsk region now.
Yeah. Why does he want any of it?
You know what? To be frank, I'm not exactly sure why. But if we look at President Biden's phone call with Vladimir Putin was essentially the equivalent of a sternly worded letter. He didn't even bother to cast disparaging remarks. President Biden has shown repeatedly that he is completely incompetent and incapable of running foreign policy. And the greatest example of that is leaving tens of thousands of American citizens to their fate to the Taliban. They've got cable television in Russia. And I'm pretty sure that Vladimir Putin saw Biden abandon our own American citizens. So what makes him think that Biden would do something to defend the Ukraine?
Yes, if he's saying, well, I mean, I'm not a huge fan personally. I'm not a big warmonger. I don't like the idea of U.S. troops going to that part of the world. Obviously, you have much more expertise in this area, and you say taking that off the table is a sign of weakness. No U.S. president has figured out or dealt with Putin appropriately. No one's ever done it. They all want to. They all want to look in his eyes and see his soul. They all do the same thing and say the same thing. No one's done it. What should this president be doing differently? And is sending U.S. troops one of those things?
Well, I want to be very clear, Kennedy. I have 5 combat tours as a Navy SEAL, and I've had about 50 of my friends killed in training in combat. Yeah. So I am one of the last people in the world that wants to get engaged in a hot conflict anywhere. But we have to understand that there's international norms that must be defended, or we truly have anarchy. And when you remove strategic options from a negotiating table, because this is an ongoing negotiation between someone who is barely there and is completely incompetent. Unfortunately, that's the President of the United States, negotiating with a former KGB counterintelligence officer. It's a mismatch. So you can't take things off the table because Vladimir Putin operates from a position of strength, and that's what he knows. The Biden administration has to show strength to Russia, just like we need to show strength with President Xi. That's not happening either. So right now, because of the incompetence of the Biden administration, China and Russia are walking all over this, and it's putting our European allies at great risk right now.
Do you think Ukraine will ever be part of NATO?
Yes.
When?
I'm not sure. They're working on a timeline. I was in Afghanistan in 2003 when the Baltic states were trying to get into NATO. And the issue is that Russia cannot be responsible for negotiating for individual separate countries if they want to get involved in NATO or not. That's incongruent with how international norms work. So the Baltic states, they're in a pinch right now. Poland has a contiguous border with Russia. The Baltic states have continuous border with Russia and Belarus. So it's an issue with these neighboring countries are having a real hard time. And the Biden administration, they said that NATO, we're 6 and 7 with those. We're besties, peas and carrots. That's not true. So the Biden administration needs to work with NATO to make sure that we're presenting a united front against this Russian aggression.
Do you think if the president were actually more powerful and a better strategist, he would withdraw the U.S. from NATO and come up with something new? Because NATO might be outdated at this point.
No, I don't.
What should he do?
As far as NATO writ large?
You're running for Congress, either in terms of NATO, but really, what is the purpose of NATO? It's a defensive alliance against Russia. So what should our country do about Russia and the growing aggression?
Well, we should make sure that people understand that NATO has been the most successful collection and military alliance in the history of the world. It simply has. Without NATO, we would have had a much more difficult time defeating the Soviet Union. So NATO needs to be strengthened. It doesn't need to be pulled apart. But the individual NATO nations need to live up to what they promised, which is spending 2% of GDP on their own defense.
Why don't they send Ukraine money? Why are we sending Ukraine $450 million?
I think because we want to deter Russian aggression.
I don't think we're doing that.
We want to do that.
I don't even think they're going to invade. I don't think it's going to come to that. I think this is what Vladimir Putin does, and I don't think anyone is. And no one's trying to understand Russia. No one's trying to understand him. Just like no one tried to understand Afghanistan. And that's you're going to have the same problems over and over and over again, until you solve that pickle puzzle. I don't know what a pickle puzzle is, but
you need to take the generational leap. And honestly, I don't think that Vladimir Putin is going to go ahead and invade Ukraine. I really hope that he doesn't. I don't think he's willing to take the economic hit that would happen with their gas production.
When the price of gas goes down, he's not going to be able to afford any more horses to ride shirtless. And that's going to be a sad day. Derrick Van Orden marching your way to victory with every appearance. Thank you very much.